The hospital lights were blinding, cold white beams that made the walls seem sharper than they were. Vanessa Reed was rushed down the corridor on a gurney, her swollen belly rising like a mountain beneath the thin hospital gown. At just 8 months pregnant, her body had endured too much. Stress, exhaustion, heartbreak. Yet she had fought to stay standing, if only for the lives inside her. But now, her body had surrendered. Nurses hurried at her side, voices clipped and urgent. "Blood pressure is spiking! She's seizing! Get her to the OR now!" Her hand reached weakly across the mattress, searching for someone who wasn't there. There should have been fingers interlacing with hers, a familiar voice whispering comfort. Instead, the space was empty. Nathan Cole, the man who had vowed to love her forever, was thousands of miles away, raising champagne glasses with another woman, his new wife, Chloe. Vanessa's lungs burned with every shallow breath, but the pain in her chest wasn't just from the contractions ripping through her body. It was the jagged wound of betrayal. Her mind replayed the moment she had first discovered the truth. The blonde hair on her pillow, the perfume that wasn't hers, the smirk on Chloe's face when she had walked into her own bedroom. She had begged Nathan to explain, to remember the vows they had made, to remember the children growing inside her. But his answer had been like a blade. "I don't want to be tied down, Vanessa. I want freedom. Chloe gives me that." Now, in the sterile hallway of Mount Sinai, that freedom cost her everything. The operating room was chaos wrapped in precision. Doctors moved with efficiency, gowns rustling, machines beeping in staccato rhythms. Vanessa's eyes fluttered open, struggling to focus on the bright ceiling above. Her voice was weak, nearly drowned by the noise. "Please, save them. My babies. Stay with us, Let's read," a doctor urged, pressing an oxygen mask over her face. "We're going to deliver them. Just hold on." Her heart pounded erratically, every beat uneven, as if it too wanted to abandon her. She thought of Leah, Ivy, and Noah, names she had whispered into the quiet nights when sleep wouldn't come. She thought of the tiny clothes folded neatly in a borrowed dresser, the dreams she had painted for them in her heart. She thought of how she would tell them someday that she had fought with everything she had, even when the man who should have stood beside her had turned away. Then the world collapsed. Her vision narrowed to a tunnel of blinding white. Her chest tightened, lungs refusing to obey. The sound of the machines changed, alarms screaming in unison. "We're losing her! She's coding!" Hands pressed against her chest, hard and relentless. Voices shouted commands. A defibrillator charged, its high-pitched whine slicing through the chaos. "Clear!" Electricity surged through her body, jerking her off the table before gravity pulled her back down. Nothing. Again. In the void, Vanessa felt herself drifting, floating into an endless darkness. It was strangely peaceful, a silence that wrapped around her like velvet. No pain, no fear, no betrayal, just nothingness. But even here, she couldn't escape the sound of her children's imagined cries, small and fragile, calling her back. The doctors refused to give up. 4 minutes stretched like eternity, each second another nail in the coffin of hope. But then, beep. A fragile rhythm returned. The monitors flickered to life, tracing weak but steady lines. Her chest rose and fell again. "She's back! We've got her back!" a nurse cried, tears of relief trembling in her voice. As the scalpel cut into her belly, the fight wasn't over. The first cry pierced the room, tiny but defiant. Then another, and another. 3 voices in the world that night, weak, premature, but alive. Vanessa didn't hear them. Her body lay still, drained from the battle. But deep inside, her soul had already made a vow. She had died once tonight, abandoned and broken. She would not die again. She would rise, no matter the cost. Across the ocean, Nathan Cole raised a glass to his glittering future, ignorant of the moment his past had nearly vanished forever. Vanessa Reed, left for dead in labor, had survived, but the war was only beginning. The hospital room was quiet except for the rhythmic hum of machines keeping 3 fragile lives stable. Vanessa opened her eyes slowly, her body heavy and weak, every breath a struggle. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic, sharp and sterile, but under it she caught the faintest cries of her newborn children. She tried to move, tried to sit up, but pain shot through her body like fire. A nurse leaned over her, whispering gently that she had survived, that her babies were alive but fighting in the neonatal intensive care unit. Relief should have flooded her, but instead a wave of loneliness washed over her like icy water. She had given birth, nearly died, and not once had Nathan walked through the door. Hours bled into days, and no bouquet, no card, no familiar footsteps came to her bedside. Nathan was gone, vanished as though she had never existed. The newspapers buzzed about his sudden marriage to Chloe, a glamorous blonde seen on his arm at parties, laughing beneath crystal chandeliers while Vanessa lay in a hospital gown, skin pale and stitched, clutching at life. Every headline was another knife, every whispered conversation in the hallway, another reminder that she had been replaced before her heart had even finished breaking. Her children were so small she could barely hold them. Tubes and wires snaked across their tiny bodies, each breath a battle, each whimper a plea. She pressed her palm gently against the glass of the incubator, whispering their names. Laya, Ivy, and Noah. She promised them she would not fail. If Nathan wanted to erase her from his life, she would etch her name deeper into theirs. They were hers, and no betrayal could take them away. Bills soon arrived like vultures circling. The hospital demanded payments for surgeries, medications, and the endless hours of specialized care. Vanessa's savings had evaporated long before Nathan left. The trust fund meant for emergencies had been emptied in his hands. Now, collection notices piled on the metal tray by her bed. She signed papers with shaking hands, agreeing to repayment plans she knew she could never meet. Each signature felt like a shackle, but each one also meant her children had another chance at survival. When she was finally discharged, her body frail and stitched, she carried her babies out into a world that did not care she had nearly died. The city was ruthless, the streets filled with strangers rushing past her as if she were invisible. She found herself in a small, damp apartment with peeling paint and a single mattress where she and the triplets slept tangled together, their breaths warm against her neck. Nights stretched long as she rocked one baby to sleep only to hear another begin crying. Hunger gnawed at her stomach as she skipped meals so the formula would last. Still, she endured. Nathan's name appeared constantly in news reports. Photos showed him on yachts, champagne in hand, Chloe glittering beside him in diamonds bought with money that should have kept Vanessa safe. He laughed in those pictures, careless and untouchable. Rumors spread that he was building a fortune on risky deals, buying his way into high society. No one mentioned the wife he left in labor or the 3 children born from that betrayal. But Vanessa carried a secret fire. In the quiet hours, when the triplets slept on her chest and the world outside was cold, she whispered promises into the dark. She swore they would never know hunger again. He swore Nathan would one day look into the faces of the children he abandoned and feel the crushing weight of his choices. The city might have thought her forgotten, but she was not broken. She was only waiting. And soon the world would remember the name Vanessa Reed. The night was heavy with rain, each drop striking the glass windows of the hotel lobby like a drumbeat of despair. Vanessa sat behind the front desk, her uniform crisp but her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. She had left her 3 fragile children at home with an elderly neighbor, knowing she could not afford to lose this job. Every hour she worked meant another bottle of formula, another night with the electricity still on. Yet even as she forced a polite smile for wealthy guests, her heart twisted with guilt for leaving her babies in the care of someone else. It was past midnight when he appeared. A tall figure in a dark overcoat stepped inside, shaking droplets from his shoulders. His presence was commanding, the kind that made the room seem smaller just by existing. He moved with the steady grace of someone who had seen battles and walked away victorious. His eyes swept the lobby and landed on Vanessa, who sat hunched over her computer screen, fighting to stay awake. For a moment, she thought he might pass her by like everyone else had, but instead he stopped at her desk. "You look like you haven't slept in weeks," he said quietly, his voice low but steady. It wasn't mockery. It was observation, almost concern. Startled, she straightened her posture, forcing the tiredness from her expression. "I'm fine, sir. Do you need a room?" He studied her a second longer, as if seeing past the polite facade she wore like armor. Then he nodded. "Yes, a suite. Something quiet." As she typed in the details, her fingers trembled. She was used to cold glances, to being invisible in a world that worshipped wealth and scorned weakness. But this man's gaze felt different. Not pity, not desire, but something steady, like recognition. He signed his name, Lucas Bennett. The letters burned into her memory. While she prepared his key, her vision blurred. She rubbed her eyes, but the room tilted, spinning around her. She hadn't eaten all day, saving the last scraps of food for her children. Her knees buckled. Before she could collapse, Lucas reached across the desk and steadied her. His hands were strong, warm, and steady. "You're not fine," he said, his voice sharper now, cutting through the silence. "You're burning yourself to the ground." Embarrassed, Vanessa pulled away, her breath ragged. "Please, sir, I just need this job. Don't tell anyone. I can't afford to lose it." Lucas said nothing for a long moment. Then he placed his wallet on the counter, sliding a black card toward her with quiet finality. "Keep it. For the babies." Her head snapped up, eyes wide with panic. "How do you—" She hadn't told him anything. But he had already seen the framed picture tucked beside her computer screen, a photo of 3 tiny infants wrapped in mismatched blankets. His gaze softened. "Because I know that look. I've seen it before. A soldier who keeps fighting long after his strength should have run out." Vanessa's throat closed. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him she didn't need saving, yet her chest ached with the truth. She was drowning. Lucas didn't press further. He only said, "You don't owe me anything. But when you decide you're ready to rise, remember my name." He took the key and walked toward the elevators, leaving her shaken, her heart pounding. For the first time since Nathan had abandoned her, she felt something stir inside her that wasn't despair. It was dangerous, fragile, but alive. It was hope. That night, as thunder rolled across the city, Vanessa whispered to her sleeping children when she returned home. "We are not alone anymore." Vanessa woke before dawn, her body aching from another sleepless night. The triplets stirred around her, small fists reaching for warmth as she prepared bottles with trembling hands. Her life had become a cycle of exhaustion, but something about the night she met Lucas Bennett lingered in her mind. His words replayed, quiet but unshakable. "When you decide you're ready to rise, remember my name." She brushed it off as a kindness from a stranger, but fate had already begun weaving their paths together. Later that week, the hotel manager called her into his office. Vanessa's heart raced, fearing she had made a mistake that would cost her the only income keeping her children alive. But instead of reprimand, she was told a wealthy guest had requested her specifically for a new position. "A private assistant," the manager explained, "with pay far higher than the front desk." Her stomach tightened as suspicion gnawed at her, until she saw the name on the request, Lucas Bennett. Reluctance warred with desperation. The bills stacked at home, the medical costs for premature lungs and fragile hearts, the constant fear of eviction. She had no choice. She accepted, not knowing she was stepping onto a path that would change her destiny. Lucas was unlike any man she had ever known. He ran meetings with precision, his voice steady and commanding, but he also noticed the smallest details. He saw the circles under her eyes, the way her hands trembled when she thought no one was watching. He never pried, never pitied, but quietly shifted burdens off her shoulders. He arranged flexible hours so she could care for the triplets. He made sure meals arrived during long shifts, delivered to her desk without a word. Vanessa fought to resist gratitude, afraid of depending on anyone again. Nathan had left scars too deep, memories of promises that turned to ash, yet Lucas never demanded anything in regards. Etern. His kindness unsettled her, A reminder that strength did not always roar. It sometimes stood quietly in the corner, waiting to be trusted. Her world began to shift. With Lucas's mentorship, she learned the sharp edges of business. He showed her how to read contracts, how to negotiate with power, how to turn survival into strategy. Nights once spent in fear became nights of study, her children asleep at her side as she drafted plans. A spark ignited in her, the memory of the woman she once dreamed of becoming before betrayal buried her beneath grief. But with every step forward, shadows grew. Nathan's empire expanded quickly, his name whispered at elite gatherings, his fortune praised in the press. The money that built his empire had been stolen from her trust, and though the world admired him, Vanessa knew the truth. Each headline stoked the fire in her chest, each article fueled her determination. She no longer dreamed of just surviving. She dreamed of reclaiming everything she had lost and building something greater on the ashes. The suspense deepened when whispers reached her ears. Nathan's company was eyeing the same contracts she and Lucas were pursuing. Their worlds, once split apart by betrayal, were circling back toward collision. Vanessa stood on the edge of something vast and dangerous. She had 3 fragile children to protect, an empire beginning to rise, and an enemy who did not yet know the storm she had become. And for the first time, she felt ready to face him. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers that hung like constellations, spilling light over silk gowns and tailored tuxedos. The Sterling Charity Gala was the crown jewel of Manhattan society, a night where fortunes were flaunted and reputations were carved into marble. Vanessa stood at the top of the grand staircase, her gown a deep shade of midnight blue that shimmered with every movement. Her hair fell in soft waves, her posture tall, her presence unshakable. For the first time in years, she no longer felt invisible. All eyes turned as she descended, and beside her walked Lucas, strong and composed, his hand steady at her back. The whispers started immediately. Some recognized her as the woman Nathan had once married, the one who had vanished when he rose to prominence. Others only saw the striking businesswoman who had stormed into the city with a new empire at her command. But none could ignore the aura she carried. She was not the abandoned wife anymore. She was something reborn. At the far end of the ballroom, Nathan entered with Chloe clinging to his arm, diamonds flashing against her skin. His smile was confident, almost smug, until his gaze locked on Vanessa. The moment froze. His expression faltered, shock rippling across his face as he realized the ghost of his past now stood radiant before him, alive when she should have been broken, powerful when he expected her to be forgotten. Vanessa did not flinch. She met his stare with calm fire, her eyes holding years of unspoken pain and the strength that had grown from it. Lucas leaned closer and murmured so only she could hear. "He's already losing. Just stand tall." The evening unfolded like a chess match. Speeches echoed across the hall, champagne flutes clinked, but beneath the surface an electric current pulsed. Vanessa's name was announced among the top donors, her contribution eclipsing Nathan's when she stepped forward to present a $10 million pledge for children's hospitals. The room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed, capturing her radiant smile, while Nathan's jaw tightened in barely concealed rage. Chloe whispered something sharp in his ear, but he barely heard her. His eyes were fixed on Vanessa, on the strength she carried, on the man at her side who fit so easily into the role Nathan had abandoned. The triplets, dressed as little angels, entered with their caretaker for a brief moment, their laughter carrying across the room. Nathan's chest tightened as he noticed details he had once ignored. The curve of a chin, the spark in their eyes. They looked too familiar. They looked like him. Suspense rippled through the night as the first cracks in Nathan's confidence appeared. He excused himself from conversations, his smile brittle. Every guest seemed drawn to Vanessa, every handshake and nod a reminder that she had returned not as a victim, but as a rival. For the first time, Nathan felt the walls closing in. Vanessa stood near the balcony, the city lights blazing behind her like fire. She did not need to confront Nathan directly. Her presence alone was confrontation enough. Still, when their paths finally crossed by the marble pillars, the silence between them spoke louder than any words. Nathan's lips parted, but no apology came. Instead, his voice was low, almost trembling. "You survived." Her reply cut through him like glass. "No, Nathan. I lived, and now I rise." That night, beneath the chandeliers and whispers of the city's elite, a war was born. Nathan realized the empire he thought untouchable now faced a storm he had created with his own betrayal. And Vanessa knew the moment she had been waiting for had arrived. The past had returned, and she was ready to strike. Nathan could not sleep after the Sterling Gala. The image of Vanessa in her midnight gown haunted him, her calm smile, the way the entire ballroom had risen to their feet for her. But what tormented him most were the 3 children who had darted into the hall for a brief moment. Their laughter was faint, but their faces were unforgettable. They carried pieces of him, shadows of his features that no diamond or drink could erase. For the first time since he walked away from that hospital bed, doubt cut through his pride like a blade. He hired investigators the very next day, men who knew how to dig beneath polished surfaces, men who could uncover secrets. Days turned to weeks, and Nathan waited, pacing in his office high above the city. When the file finally arrived, thick with photographs and documents, he flipped it open with shaking hands. There they were, birth certificates, hospital records, DNA whispers written in bloodlines. Laya, Ivy, Noah, his children, his flesh and blood, children he had abandoned while their mother nearly died. Rage clashed with regret inside him. He stormed through the glass walls of his empire, snapping at employees, ignoring Chloe's questions, drowning his conscience in expensive whiskey. But the truth would not vanish. Those children bore his name in their eyes, even if they carried another man's love in their hearts. And now Vanessa had returned, not as the woman he had once dismissed, but as a storm threatening to rip apart everything he had built. Meanwhile, Vanessa felt the shift in the air. Her instincts told her Nathan would not stay silent. Each morning she woke earlier, pushing herself harder, preparing for the inevitable clash. Lucas watched her with quiet intensity, his presence steady. "He knows," Lucas said one evening as they stood in her office overlooking the skyline. "And he will come for you." Vanessa's voice did not waver. "Then let him come. I've been waiting for this moment since the night I almost died." Suspense grew with each passing day. Nathan appeared at events he had once ignored, always standing in the distance, his eyes fixed on Vanessa and the children. The triplets grew restless under his shadow, asking questions about the man who stared at them with unsettling intensity. Vanessa deflected with grace, but inside her chest the storm churned hotter. The breaking point came on a rainy afternoon. Vanessa left her office and found Nathan leaning against her car in the parking garage, his suit damp, his face pale with obsession. His voice was ragged, stripped of arrogance. "They're mine, aren't they?" he demanded. Vanessa's breath caught, but she met his gaze with steel. "They stopped being yours the night you abandoned me in labor." Nathan staggered back as though struck. For the first time he saw the full force of the woman he had betrayed. Her eyes no longer held love, only fire. The silence between them was suffocating, heavy with years of pain and unanswered questions. He whispered, almost broken, "I want to know them." Vanessa's reply was sharp, final. "You forfeited that right the moment you chose Chloe over their lives. You don't deserve to know the sound of their laughter or the weight of their embrace." The suspense sharpened as Nathan's jaw tightened, torn between guilt and desperation. He realized he could not charm his way back, could not erase the choices he had made. But he also knew he was not ready to let go. From that moment, the battle lines were drawn. Vanessa prepared to defend her children with every ounce of strength she possessed, while Nathan plotted a path to claw back what he believed was his. The war had officially begun. The storm broke inside the towering glass walls of Aurora Enterprises. Vanessa sat behind her desk, her children's drawings pinned proudly on the wall behind her, when the door slammed open. Nathan strode in without invitation, his face twisted with desperation and fury. The security guards had tried to stop him, but he had forced his way past them, driven by an obsession that no locked door could contain. Vanessa did not rise. She stayed seated, her eyes sharp, her voice steady. "You shouldn't be here." Nathan's hands trembled as he dropped a stack of documents on her desk. DNA tests, photographs, hospital records. His voice cracked as he spoke. "They're mine. All this time you kept them from me. You let me believe you were gone, that there was nothing left. And now you parade them around with him like they're his." Vanessa's composure held, though her heart hammered in her chest. She lifted the papers slowly, scanning them with calm precision, then set them aside as though they were worthless scraps. "You think a piece of paper makes you a father? You think blood erases the night you chose another woman's bed while I bled on an operating table? You abandoned us, Nathan, and you don't get to rewrite history." His voice rose, echoing against the glass. "I made mistakes, but they are mine, Vanessa. You can't deny me that." Her fury flared, her words sharp enough to cut. "No, they are mine. Mine to protect, mine to raise, mine to love. You forfeited your claim the moment you left me to die. You don't get to call yourself their father because fatherhood is not in blood, it is in sacrifice. And the man who has been at my side these past years has already earned that place. His name is Lucas Bennett." The name landed like a strike. Nathan staggered back, his pride cracking under the weight of truth. He had seen Lucas at the gala, towering beside Vanessa, adored by the children. The thought that another man had filled the space he abandoned gnawed at him like poison. Nathan's anger turned cold, calculated. "You think you've built something untouchable, but I still have power. I still have influence. I can take this company from you. I can drag you through the courts. I can make sure the world knows the truth, that you kept my children from me." Vanessa rose then, her presence fierce, her eyes burning with the strength of a woman forged in fire. "Do you really want the world to know the truth, Nathan? That while your wife lay in labor, you were on your honeymoon with another woman? That while I flatlined on a table, you were laughing under chandeliers? Go ahead. Let the world see the man behind the mask. Let them watch as the empire you built on lies collapses under its own weight." The silence that followed was suffocating. Nathan's jaw clenched, his eyes dark with a mixture of regret and rage. He wanted to shout, to break her, but he knew the truth was on her side. She had survived what should have killed her, and she stood now stronger than he could ever be. He turned toward the door, his voice low, trembling with both threat and defeat. "This isn't over, Vanessa. You haven't seen the last of me." As the door slammed behind him, Vanessa stood in the quiet, her chest rising with steady breaths. She knew Nathan's obsession would not fade. He would come harder, more dangerous, more ruthless. But she also knew one thing with absolute certainty. He had awakened a storm he could never control. And when the final reckoning came, it would be his empire that burned. The city skyline glittered beneath a rising moon, but inside the boardrooms of Manhattan, a war was already being waged. Vanessa sat at the head of a long glass table, her team of executives gathered around her. Contracts, financial reports, and legal files spread across the surface like weapons ready for battle. Lucas stood at her right, silent but steady, his eyes scanning every detail. The time for hiding was over. Nathan had crossed the line, and now she would dismantle the empire he built on her stolen inheritance. Across the city, Nathan was unraveling. His office reeked of whiskey, papers torn across the floor, his voice hoarse from shouting at lawyers who could no longer shield him. Whispers of fraud had begun to circulate. Journalists sniffed at the edges of his wealth. Regulators asked questions his accountants could not answer. For years he had balanced on lies, but Vanessa had pushed just hard enough for cracks to form. The empire he flaunted at galas now trembled on unsteady ground. The suspense escalated when a bombshell article hit the morning papers. Lucas's brother, an investigative journalist with a reputation for exposing corruption, published a front-page story titled "The Fraud Behind the Fortune." The article traced Nathan's fortune back to missing funds from Vanessa's trust, laid out evidence of falsified deals, and revealed his ruthless betrayals. The city erupted in whispers. Investors withdrew. Partners fled. By the end of the week, the Securities and Exchange Commission froze his accounts. Vanessa read the paper in silence as sunlight streamed through her office windows. For years, she had endured humiliation and poverty while Nathan lived in excess. Now, for the first time, the scales tipped in her favor. Still, the battle was not yet won. Nathan was dangerous when cornered. She knew he would fight like a drowning man clawing for air. Her prediction came true that very night. Nathan stormed into a shareholders' meeting, demanding loyalty, promising revival, but his words fell flat. Screens behind him flickered with damning evidence, contracts forged in his handwriting, numbers that no longer added up. Panic spread across the room, and the board turned against him. When he slammed his fist on the table, shouting that Vanessa had orchestrated it all, the cameras caught every second. The footage spread online within hours, transforming his rage into the world's entertainment. Meanwhile, Vanessa tightened her hold. She signed new deals Nathan had once coveted, sealing contracts with companies who now refused to take his calls. Her empire grew stronger with each step, while his crumbled beneath his feet. But the most suspenseful strike came from the courtroom. Vanessa's lawyers filed a massive civil suit demanding restitution for the money stolen from her trust. Witnesses lined up to testify. Evidence stacked higher each day. Nathan appeared in court with eyes hollow, his expensive suits no longer able to mask the desperation gnawing at him. Chloe, the woman he had abandoned everything for, delivered the final betrayal. She filed for divorce and vanished with another man, leaving Nathan alone at the center of the storm. His empire, his marriage, his reputation, all disintegrating piece by piece. Yet even as he fell, his eyes always sought Vanessa in the courtroom. He watched her walk past him in tailored elegance, Lucas at her side, the children waiting at home, their laughter filling her world with light. He saw everything he had lost and everything she had gained. The war of empires was no longer silent. It was fire against fire, steel against steel. And for the first time, Nathan understood he was not fighting just a woman. He was fighting the phoenix he had created when he abandoned her. And she would not stop until nothing remained of the empire he had stolen. The ocean roared softly against the sand as twilight painted the Hampton sky in shades of gold and crimson. A long aisle of white petals stretched across the beach, lanterns flickering with a warm glow. Guests rose from their seats as music swelled, the sound of strings blending with the rhythm of waves. At the edge of the aisle stood Lucas, dressed in a white suit, his expression calm but filled with emotion. His eyes never left the woman about to walk toward him. Vanessa appeared, her gown shimmering like liquid champagne, each step graceful yet weighted with the journey that had brought her here. Her veil caught the breeze, lifting gently as though even the wind wished to honor her. In each hand she held the tiny palms of her daughters, while Noah, in a miniature tuxedo, walked proudly beside her. The children scattered petals as they went, laughter bubbling from them like music. Every guest smiled, their hearts drawn to the picture of a family forged not by chance, but by choice and sacrifice. Yet hidden beyond the dunes, eyes full of shadows watched. Nathan stood there, his suit rumpled, his face drawn and pale. He had slipped past the perimeters of security, not to disrupt, but to witness. The sight before him cut deeper than any courtroom defeat or lost fortune. Vanessa, the woman he once abandoned, was radiant, loved, complete. The man beside her was the father he could never be, the husband he failed to become. The children he had once dismissed as burdens were now a crown upon her head, symbols of triumph he could not erase. The ceremony began with words that pierced Nathan's heart. The officiant spoke of love that is proven through sacrifice, of families built not only by blood, but by devotion. Each vow Vanessa and Lucas exchanged struck him like thunder. When Vanessa promised to love Lucas as the man who lifted her when she was drowning, Nathan's chest tightened. When Lucas vowed to cherish the children as his own, Nathan's vision blurred. He had dreamed of power, of freedom, of luxury, but here was the one treasure he had thrown away, glowing in the fading sunlight. The suspense thickened when little Noah turned to the crowd and shouted with childlike joy, "Papa, look! Mama is so beautiful!" The guests laughed softly, and Lucas knelt to kiss his son's forehead. Nathan staggered behind the dunes, clutching at the sand as tears blurred his view. He had never been called Papa. He had never heard his children claim him. That word belonged to another man now. As Vanessa and Lucas kissed, sealing their vows, applause thundered across the beach. Fireworks exploded above the horizon, painting the sky with light. Guests cheered, the children squealed with joy, and Lucas lifted Vanessa into his arms, spinning her in triumph. Nathan fell to his knees in the shadows, his fingers digging into the earth. He had come to see what he thought he could still reclaim, but the truth was merciless. That life was no longer his. He had abandoned it long ago. The night closed with laughter, dancing, and love. But outside the circle of light, Nathan remained, broken and invisible, a ghost haunting the very happiness he had once been offered and destroyed. He whispered to himself, the words trembling, "That should have been me." But deep inside, he knew it never could be again. The morning after the wedding dawned with sunlight spilling across the ocean, but the brightness could not erase the darkness that trailed behind Nathan. News spread like wildfire through the city. Nathan Cole, once celebrated as a visionary entrepreneur, had been sentenced to federal prison. The court had found him guilty of embezzlement, fraud, and financial manipulation, his empire proven to be built on stolen money. Reporters camped outside the courthouse, flaky, cameras capturing his bowed head as marshals led him away in handcuffs. The world that once applauded him now spat his name with contempt. Yet the most devastating blow was not the iron bars waiting for him. It was the silence from the family he had abandoned. He knew Vanessa would not come to see him, and the children who carried his blood would never call his name. They had already chosen another man, and he had earned the right Nathan had thrown away. That knowledge broke him more than any sentence the judge could hand down. Weeks passed. Then one evening a letter arrived at Vanessa's Hamptons home. The handwriting was uneven, the ink blotched as though written with trembling hands. She opened it carefully, sitting by the window as her children played in the garden and Lucas set the table for dinner. The words were haunting, raw, and filled with regret. "Vanessa, I watched you marry him. I stood in the shadows and saw the life I should have cherished slipping further from my reach. The sound of our children laughing cut deeper than any prison cell could. I see their faces in my dreams, and I wake to bars that remind me of everything I lost. I abandoned you in labor. I abandoned them before they took their first breaths. That moment will haunt me for the rest of my life. I thought I was choosing freedom, but I chained myself to emptiness. Now, every time I close my eyes, I see Lucas holding them, and I know the truth. He is their father. He is the man I should have been. I do not ask forgiveness. I only ask that you tell them, one day, that I knew I did not deserve them, that I surrendered the right to be called their father, that my love came too late. Nathan." Vanessa folded the letter with steady hands. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction in his downfall, only a quiet release, as though the last ghost of her past had finally been laid to rest. She walked outside where Lucas was lifting Noah into the air, Ivy and Leia chasing each other through the grass. Their laughter carried on the wind, purr'd, and unbroken. She knelt beside them, pulling all three children close as they clung to her with bright smiles. Lucas wrapped his arms around them, his warmth encircling her. For the first time in years, Vanessa felt the weight lift from her shoulders. She whispered into their hair, her voice steady and full of love. "We are free now. Free to live. Free to love. Free to rise." The ocean stretched endless before them, waves crashing like applause, the sun painting the horizon with fire and light. Vanessa had been abandoned, broken, left for dead, but she had risen from the ashes, stronger than ever, with a family born not of blood alone, but of choice, sacrifice, and love. And as the world turned, she knew one truth would echo forever. Nathan had walked away from the greatest treasure life could offer, and in doing so, he had handed it to the man who cherished it. Lucas had not stolen anything. He had simply given back to Vanessa what she always deserved: a love that endured, a family that thrived, and a future where betrayal was nothing more than a shadow fading behind the brilliance of her new dawn.